Welcome back once again. Today we're going to talk about QNAP Container Station, LXC versus LXD. So QNAP Container Station hosts LXC, LXD, and Docker containers. In June of 2021, QNAP announced that LXC containers would not be supported after the end of the year. Yet, almost immediately, they released a new version of Container Station which disallowed the creation of new LXC containers because you could not see LXC container templates any longer. Existing LXC containers continue to work, and LXC containers can be imported to Container Station as long as you have an exported container previously. So what are the features of LXC in Container Station? Well, a new LXC container lets you choose an adapter interface and choose bridge mode and set an IP address. LXC containers are supported in Container Station, import, and export. What are the features of LXD in Container Station? Well, LXD containers in Container Station allow bridge mode but do not allow you to set an IP address. You must set the IP address in the container OS or use a DHCP address reservation on your network. In the Advanced Settings device section, you must check the box to run containers in privileged mode or your LXD container will not start. LXD import and export is not an option. And LXD containers will not allow switching an interface after creation. This is promised to be fixed in Container Station 2.4.2.83. Okay, so here I am running QTS5. And by the way, I might point out whether you're running the QTS4 or QTS5, apparently the application versions of things like Container Station are not really tied to the version of QTS you're running. So here's Container Station, and I bring it up, go ahead and maximize it here. And I have a bunch of LXC containers and one Docker container in this particular NAS. And so I'm going to go off and try to create an LXC container. And generally the way you create an LXC container is you look down in the list, and in the older version of Container Station, you would have noticed at the bottom that there were several LXC containers given to you as choices of containers that you could add. Well, those are no longer here today. So you, I believe, are limited to the fact that you can do an import of an existing container. So I can click my import command here, and I can look down in, I have a directory called Container Station, and I have a tar file for a previous backup of LXC. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it that I want to import that LXC container. And I'm just going to call this guy test-LXC. And you can see it's a LXC container from there. But the point is that this is just like creating one if we could create one from scratch. I just happen to have an exported one here. So I set the CPU limit at 20% and the memory at 4 gigs of memory. We go to Advanced Settings now, and the MAC address is grayed out. You're going to want to hit this little arrow at the right to generate a MAC address. The reason for this is because when your container restarts, or actually when your NAS restarts, we don't want it to get a new address every time. This allows it to receive the same MAC address every time, which is convenient on your network. And down here, I'm going to go ahead and instead of NAT, I'm going to go ahead and choose bridge mode. So on bridge mode, I can choose any of my adapters that I have here. And we'll just say we're going to choose this LabNet adapter, and I can say use static address, and I can go out here and I can statically address this thing. So, I mean, if I wanted to address something at 192.168.50.2, I could do that. And I go ahead and say well, before I do create, we'll go over to device. Device doesn't have anything in it. There's no checkboxes, nothing unusual. Shared folders, yeah, I could mount some external folders to the LXC container if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. So I'm just going to go with these network settings, and I'm going to go ahead and say create this thing. So there's the verification screen, and I go off and create the container. So up here, it'll show the process of the container being created. It's importing it right now. This is pretty much the same as if you were creating a container from scratch, but as I pointed out, in the newer version of Container Station, I can no longer create LXC containers. So instead, I'm importing the LXC container. So here we go, and it says it's completed. So there's success. I'll go ahead and clear that entry because I don't need to have that in there. I'll go to Overview. I'll click on my test LXC container. Here it is. If I see if we can blow the screen up a little bit more, see if I do an if config, and it comes back and says you're running at 192.168.50.2. So that shows that this container worked just the way we expected it to. It did what it was supposed to do. If I look out of my network, I would see that it is running at that address. So our test LXC container, if we go into it, we notice that it's running at that .1 address. We also can go into the export command, and we can say export container, and we can go down here and choose test LXC, and we can export it. I'm not going to do it, but the option's there and it works. Now, if we go back to overview now, and this time we're going to go ahead and choose the create option. We're going to create a LXD container. And this isn't real straightforward because basically all the containers you would create here would be LXD containers unless you're creating one of the templates below. And none of the templates, as I indicated earlier, were included LXD. So we're going to type in Ubuntu as an example, and we're going to click search. And then you'll notice across the top, and this is what's different in this newer version of Container Station, you now have a section called LXD Image Server. So we're going to choose LXD Image Server. In this particular case, I'm going to choose the last template down here, which is Ubuntu Focal. And I'm going to go ahead and click Install. It says, okay, you're going to create a LXD container. And in this case, I'm going to call this thing LXD-test. And I'll go ahead like the LXC container, and I'll set this thing at 20% of CPU and 4096, 4 gigs of memory. By the way, those are caps. They're not amounts of memory it'll use. They're simply performance caps. So then I click Advanced Settings. And again, I'll go ahead and refresh the MAC address so I get the same MAC address every time. And I'll go down and I'll select Bridge Mode. And just like last time, I'll go to LabNet Network. And here it says use a virtual switch to give each container a unique IP address. I don't even know what that's supposed to exactly mean, and neither does QNAP. But basically what you're not seeing here is you're not seeing the ability to actually set an address. Okay, so moving along, if we go down to the device section, you'll also notice in the device section, there is another checkbox that says run containers in privilege mode. We have to check this. If we don't check this and we create our LXD container and try to start it, it won't start. It'll just give you an error. And we're not going to put anything in shared folders like we did not put anything in shared folders for the LXC container. So I'll go ahead and go back to network, again, reminding you that there's no way to set an address here. And I'll say create. Okay, so one of the things, we'll go back up here to overview, and we'll go over here and watch this thing create itself. It says creating container right now. And it says completed. So I say, okay, fine, clear that. And here is the LXD test container. Now, if I click on it and it opens this thing up, you'll notice that the real difference in this, and I know it's kind of microfilmed here, it's kind of hard to make this larger, but what we have is instead of being presented with a prompt like we are in the LXC container, we're presented with a login prompt. And the only correct credentials would be the credentials for whatever a standard LXD container are. And there really aren't any pre-established credentials. So what you have to do is you have to go up here to terminal, and it'll come up with a screen that says execute terminal, and you'll have to go ahead and say launch bin/sh so we can bring up a shell. And then what it does is it opens another tab. And this tab gives us root access. So I have to basically do an add user. Let's do an add user Scott, and I establish a password on Scott, and then I go ahead and create that, and then I'm going to do a user mod -a capital G sudo Scott, thus adding Scott to the sudo group. And then I'm going to do a sudo apt, or I don't have to do sudo because I'm at a root privilege here anyway. So if I do an apt install net-tools, that will give us a way to look at our IP address. So if I say if config now, I know I could have done an IPA. I just like the format of this better. So it used the DHCP server on my network to get an address at 192.168.50.223. So I could go out to my network configuration, my network administration, and I could establish a DHCP address reservation and set the address to what I want, or I could go into Ubuntu here and set it. And then very simply, I can say sudo apt install open SSH-server, and we install open SSH server so we can SSH to this thing. That'll go on for a little bit. I can go back here to this, well, let's just IPA just to show you that works. So the address of this thing is, okay, be like that. There it is, 223. So the address is 223 on my 50 network. So I'll go ahead and exit out of this because I'm kind of done with this. And we'll go back to Container Station here. And I'll try to take it out of play school mode, put it back in a reasonable size. And I'm going to go ahead and launch a terminal. And I'm going to do an SSH over to 192.168.50. What did we say it was? 229? Nope, I guess it wasn't 229. We'll have to go back again and find it. So bring terminal up again, /bin/sh, if config. Okay, be like that. Such as live video, right? Let's try that again. Let's just sign in here. Scott. And then my password. Okay, it doesn't like my password because I can't type my name. All right. Now we're logged in. If config. Okay, it was 223. So we're going to go ahead and SSH over to 223. Create a fingerprint, yes. Use my password, and I'm logged in. So there you go. We are actually logged into my LXD instance called LXD test. So that all works. So that once we do all those steps, that we essentially have a container that runs like the LXC container. However, if we have a really complex configuration in this thing, we would want to go ahead and export this. So we click on export, we go into our containers to export, and you'll notice that we have all of our LXCs up here, but nowhere is our test-LXD. And that is because they do not support, QNAP does not support in Container Station exporting the container yet. Okay, so what do we take away from all of this? Well, basically, LXC is an underlying dependency for LXD. You cannot have a computer with LXD on it without having LXC as an underlying dependency, basically. QNAP is moving users into LXD without compatibility for existing LXC features that they had in their container station that was supporting LXC. And QNAP has stated that LXC is no longer supported after the end of the year, but there's no tool to transition existing LXC containers and data to LXD. Anyway, if you liked what you saw today, thank you. Subscribe and like, and we'll see you next time on Down the Road.